I stood in the kitchen I'd paid for, holding a cake I'd baked with my own hands, and heard my daughter-in-law introduce me as the help. "Oh, that's Estelle," she said, her voice dripping with honey and ice. "She just lives in our guest room." I froze, the weight of those words sinking into my bones. A guest? In the home I'd built? I stayed quiet, but not because I had no choice. I was waiting. Welcome to the Betrayal Revenge channel, where stories come alive through voices you've never heard told this way before. Thank you for joining us. Let's uncover the truth together. It all began on a crisp autumn evening in our quiet Utah town, at a birthday party I'd poured my heart into. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, the scent of the chocolate cake I'd spent all morning perfecting. Its edges were smooth, frosted with care, the kind of cake you make when you want someone to feel loved. My grandson's 4th birthday. I'd been up since dawn, stringing balloons across the living room, polishing the dining table until it gleamed under the chandelier. The house was alive with the hum of preparations, my preparations, the clink of wine glasses I'd set out, the soft jazz Travis liked drifting from the speakers I'd dusted. This was their home, yes, but it was my heart that had built it. Every brick, every mortgage payment, every sacrifice, it was mine. I adjusted the napkins, my fingers brushing the linen I'd chosen years ago when Travis and Riley first moved in. Back then, I thought I was giving them a foundation, a place to grow. I'd sold my own small apartment to cover the down payment, moved into their guest room to help out. Help out. That's what they called it. But as I stood there, tying a ribbon around a chair, I felt the familiar ache in my chest. Was this all I was to them? A pair of hands to make their lives easier? The guests arrived in a flurry of laughter and coats, their voices echoing through the open-plan living room. I smoothed my apron, tucked a strand of gray hair behind my ear, and carried the cake to the table. My grandson's eyes lit up, and for a moment, I felt warm, seen. But then Riley swept in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, her smile as polished as her Instagram feed. She wore a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her hair falling in perfect waves. "Everyone, please take a seat," she called, her voice bright, commanding. Travis followed, loosening his tie, his eyes scanning the room but never landing on me. I stood at the edge of the table, holding a stack of plates, waiting for a cue that never came. The guests settled, their chatter rising. A woman in a red scarf, someone I didn't know, leaned toward Riley and asked, "Who's helping with all this? You've outdone yourself." Riley's laugh was light, musical, the kind that made people lean closer. "Oh, that's Estelle," she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction without looking at me. "She just lives in our guest room, helps out around the house." The words landed like a slap, sharp and cold. I felt my breath catch, my fingers tightening around the plates. Helps out? I wanted to scream that this was my house, my table, my cake. But I didn't. I stood there, the plates heavy in my hands, as the woman in the red scarf raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a maid?" she asked, half laughing, as if it were a joke. Riley's smile didn't falter. She tilted her head, her eyes glinting. "Something like that," she said, and the table erupted in soft chuckles. Travis, sitting at the head of the table, sipped his wine and said nothing. Not a word, not a glance. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, the boy I'd stayed up nights for when he was sick, the boy I'd sold my life for, he just sat there, letting the laughter roll over me like a wave. I felt the room shrink, the walls closing in. The air was too warm, the jazz too loud. I set the plates down, my hands trembling, and excused myself to the kitchen. The swinging door closed behind me, muffling the laughter. I gripped the counter, staring at the sink where I'd washed dishes for years. My reflection stared back from the polished faucet. Tired eyes, lined face, a woman who'd given everything and become invisible. A maid? In my own home? I thought of the guest room upstairs, the small space they'd given me, a single bed, a chipped dresser, a window that looked out on their manicured lawn. It wasn't a home, it was a cage. And yet, I'd stayed. Why? Because I thought that's what mothers did. Sacrifice, endure. But standing there, the taste of vanilla still lingering from the cake batter I'd licked off my finger, I felt something shift. A question, sharp and unyielding, rose in my mind. Is this all I am to them? A shadow in my own family? I didn't go back to the party. I climbed the stairs to my room, each step heavier than the last, and closed the door. The laughter drifted up, faint but relentless. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, and stared at the wall. The question echoed, louder now, refusing to be ignored. And somewhere, deep inside, another question was forming, one I wasn't ready to face. What if this wasn't just ingratitude? What if something was wrong, terribly wrong, with the family I'd given my life to? The laughter from that birthday party clung to me like damp air, heavy and inescapable. I lay in my guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of a street lamp slicing through the blinds. Why did Riley's words cut so deep? Why did Travis's silence hurt more than any insult? I'd always told myself I was strong, that a mother's love could bear anything. But as the hours ticked by, I began to wonder, had I been lying to myself all along? The guest room was small, its walls a faded beige that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air smelled faintly of lavender air freshener, a scent Riley insisted on, though it made my throat itch. I sat up in bed, the springs creaking under my weight, and reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. My hands were still unsteady, the memory of that evening replaying in my mind like a song I couldn't stop humming. She just lives in our guest room. Riley's voice, so casual, so cruel. And Travis, my son, my heart, he'd let it happen. He'd let me become a stranger in the home I'd built for him. I stood and paced the room, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The guest room wasn't meant for living, not really. It was a place for temporary things, visitors, spare luggage, forgotten hobbies. Yet here I was, year after year, my life squeezed into a corner of their world. I stopped by the window, pulling back the curtain to look at the lawn below. The balloons from the party still bobbed in the breeze, their colors muted in the moonlight. I'd tied those balloons myself, each knot a small act of love. And for what? To be laughed at? To be dismissed? I sank into the chair by the dresser, my reflection staring back from the small clouded mirror. My hair was grayer than I remembered, my eyes tired but sharp. I thought back to the years before this house, before Riley, before the guest room. I'd been a nurse once, a midwife, delivering babies in a small hospital in this very town. I'd held mothers' hands, wiped their tears, whispered encouragement as they brought life into the world. I was good at it, damn good. But when Travis's father died, I'd given it up. I couldn't juggle grief, a toddler, and night shifts, so I chose Travis. I chose to be his mother, his everything. Every fever he had, I was there with a cool cloth. Every school play, I was in the front row, clapping until my hands stung. Every dream he had, I made mine. I remembered the day he graduated high school, his cap tilted on his head, his grin wide and boyish. I'd sold my car to pay for his senior trip, told him it was fine, I could walk. He'd hugged me then, called me Mom, in a way that made my chest ache with pride. Where was that boy now? When did he stop seeing me? I thought of the milestones after. His wedding to Riley, the way she'd swept into our lives like a storm, all charm and ambition. I'd tried to love her, tried to see what Travis saw. She was a lifestyle coach, whatever that meant, always posting about gratitude and self-care while snapping at waiters and rolling her eyes when I spoke. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I could win her over. I told myself a lot of things. But lately, something had shifted. Travis had grown distant, his conversations with me clipped, his eyes avoiding mine. He didn't call me Mom in front of others anymore, not since Riley started introducing me as Estelle to her friends. I'd brushed it off, blamed it on their busy lives, their new roles as parents. But standing in that guest room, the truth was harder to ignore. They didn't just forget me. They erased me, and I'd let them. I opened the dresser drawer, pulling out an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. The cover was worn, the leather cracked at the edges. I flipped through it, each page a memory I'd clung to like a lifeline. Travis as a baby, his tiny hand curled around my finger. Travis at 5, his face smeared with birthday cake. Travis at 16, awkward in a too big suit for prom. I traced his face with my fingertip, searching for the boy I'd raised. Was he still in there somewhere? Or had I been loving a version of him that didn't exist anymore? The album slipped from my hands, landing on the floor with a soft thud. A loose photo fluttered out, one I hadn't seen in years. It was me, younger, standing outside the hospital where I'd worked. My scrubs were wrinkled, my smile tired but real. I'd been proud then, proud of the lives I'd touched, proud of the son I was raising alone. I picked up the photo, my thumb brushing the edge. When did I stop being that woman? When did I start believing I was only as valuable as the chores I did for them? I tucked the photo back into the album and closed it, my hands steady now. The question that had haunted me all night was growing louder, sharper. Why did I stay? I'd told myself it was for Travis, for my grandson, for the family I'd dreamed of. But what if that family didn't want me? What if I'd been holding on to a lie, not a home? I looked around the guest room, the narrow bed, the chipped dresser, the life I'd let myself shrink into, and for the first time, I felt something new. Not just pain, but anger. Not at them, not yet. At myself, for staying, for settling, for believing I deserved so little. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window watching the balloons sway in the dark, their strings tugging against the weight of the night. The question wasn't just why I stayed. It was bigger, heavier, and it scared me to ask it. What if this wasn't the family I was meant to have? What if something deeper, something I couldn't yet name, was wrong? The guest room was silent, but my heart roared with a question I couldn't unask. How did I become a stranger in my own home? I'd spent years convincing myself that love meant enduring, that a mother's place was in the shadows. But as I stood in that cramped room, Riley's laughter still echoing in my ears, I felt something break, not my heart, but my patience. Was this the moment I'd finally stop pretending? The morning after the birthday party, the house was a mess. Streamers hung limp from the ceiling, wine glasses sat sticky on the counter, and the kitchen smelled of leftover cake and regret. I moved through it like a ghost, picking up crumpled napkins, stacking plates in the sink. My hands worked on instinct, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Riley's words. She just lives in our guest room. And Travis's silence, heavier than any insult. I scrubbed a plate harder than necessary, the sponge squeaking against the porcelain. Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he defend me? I heard Riley before I saw her, her heels clicking as she descended the stairs. She breezed into the kitchen, phone in hand, her voice bright as she recorded a voice note. "Morning, tribe. Let's manifest abundance today," she chirped, then stopped when she saw me. Her smile tightened, just for a second, before she resumed scrolling. "Estelle, you don't have to do all that," she said, not looking up. "Next time, let the caterer handle it. You stressed the kitchen." Stressed the kitchen? I set the plate down, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter. The kitchen I'd stocked, the oven I'd cleaned, the table I'd set, she was scolding me for it? I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to tell her this was my house, that I'd paid for every inch of it, that her lifestyle coaching didn't pay the bills. But I didn't. I stood there, the air thick with the scent of dish soap and my own unspoken rage. Travis shuffled in next, his hair mussed, his eyes on his phone. "Morning," he mumbled, grabbing a coffee mug. He didn't look at me, didn't ask how I was after last night's humiliation. I watched him pour coffee, the steam curling upward, and felt a pang of something sharper than sadness, betrayal. "Travis," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. He glanced up, barely. "What's up?" I swallowed, searching for the words. "Last night, what Riley said." I trailed off, waiting for him to meet my eyes, to see me. He didn't. He just shrugged, sipping his coffee. "You should rest more, Mom," he said, his tone flat. "Or maybe find a place of your own." The words hit like a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. A place of my own? This was my place. I'd sold my apartment, my security, to give him this house. I'd moved into their guest room to be close, to help, to be family. And now he was suggesting I leave? I stared at him, waiting for a flicker of regret, a hint that he didn't mean it. But he just scrolled through his phone, oblivious, as if I were already gone. Riley chimed in, her voice bright but edged. Yeah, Estelle, you deserve your own space. Somewhere cozy. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, and I saw it then. Their plan. They didn't want me here. Not as a mother, not as a grandmother, not even as a guest. They wanted me out, erased, a footnote in their perfect, curated life. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The kitchen felt too small, the air too thin. I turned back to the sink, my hands trembling as I rinsed another plate. But inside, something was shifting. The anger I'd felt last night wasn't just at myself anymore. It was at them. At Riley's smugness, at Travis's indifference, at the life I'd let them steal from me. I dried my hands, the towel rough against my skin, and made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I was done. That night, I lay in the guest room, the moonlight casting shadows across the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud. I thought of the years I'd spent here, tiptoeing around their lives, swallowing my pride to keep the peace. I thought of the mortgage papers I'd signed, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd poured into a family that didn't love me back. And I thought of that word, guest. It burned sharp and bitter in my chest. I sat up, my heart pounding. I couldn't stay here, not anymore. Not in a house that mocked me, not with people who saw me as less than nothing. I pulled a suitcase from under the bed, the zipper loud in the stillness. I didn't pack much, just clothes, a few photos, the old album from my nursing days. Each item felt like a piece of myself I was reclaiming. I moved quietly, deliberately, as if the act of packing was a ritual, a shedding of the woman I'd let myself become. Before dawn, I stood in the kitchen one last time. The house was dark, the counters clean, the balloons gone. I placed my house key on the table, the metal cold against my fingers. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. I spoke one sentence aloud, my voice steady in the silence. I won't be a guest in a home I built. Then I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me, the early morning air sharp against my face. As I drove away, the town still asleep under a gray sky, I felt hollow, unmoored. I didn't know where I was going, not yet. But I knew I wasn't coming back. The question that had haunted me, how did I become a stranger, was no longer a mystery. They'd made me one, piece by piece, and I'd let them. But now, as the road stretched before me, another question took its place. Who was I without them? And what would I find when I stopped running from the truth? The road stretched dark and empty before me, the hum of my old car the only sound breaking the dawn. I'd left the house behind, the key on the kitchen table, my heart raw but resolute. I thought walking away would feel like freedom, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. But as the miles blurred past, a new question gnawed at me. If I wasn't their mother, their grandmother, their help, then who was I? And why did the silence of this new beginning feel so heavy? The house I drove to wasn't mine, not really. It had belonged to my mother Agnes, a small weathered cottage on the outskirts of our Utah town, tucked between pines and a creek that barely trickled anymore. I hadn't been back in years, not since her funeral. The key was still on my ring, though, rusted but familiar, and when I turned it in the lock, the door groaned like it was waking from a long sleep. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory, the scent of old wood and faded lavender. The furniture was draped in sheets, the windows cloudy with grime. It felt like stepping into a photograph, one I'd forgotten I'd taken. I dropped my suitcase by the door, the thud echoing in the stillness. The living room was small, the fireplace cold, the mantel lined with framed photos of me and Travis as a boy. I avoided looking at them. Instead, I moved through the house, pulling sheets off chairs, opening windows to let the crisp morning air chase away the mustiness. The floorboards creaked under my steps, each one a reminder of the life I'd left behind. Not just Travis and Riley's house, but the woman I'd been there. The one who stayed quiet, who cleaned up, who believed love meant shrinking herself. I settled into the kitchen, the heart of Agnes's home. The table was scarred from years of meals, the chairs wobbly but sturdy. I ran my fingers over the wood, remembering the times I'd sat here as a child, watching my mother knead dough or write letters. She'd been a force, Agnes, sharp-tongued, unyielding, always knowing more than she said. I wish she were here now to tell me what to do with this ache in my chest, this emptiness that wasn't quite freedom. I made tea, the kettle's whistle jarring in the quiet. The steam curled upward, warming my hands as I sat at the table, staring out the window at the overgrown garden. The roses Agnes loved were wild now, tangled and thorny. Like me, I thought, half laughing, half crying. I was 66 years old, starting over in a house that felt more like a museum than a home, and yet there was a strange comfort in it. This place didn't belong to Travis or Riley. It didn't demand I be anything other than myself. But who was that? That night, I found an old notebook in a drawer, its pages yellowed but blank. I hadn't written anything in years, not since my nursing days when I'd jot down patient notes or recipes. I opened it, the spine cracking, and picked up a pen. My hand hovered, unsure. What did I want to say? I started simply, "I left today. I don't know why it took so long." The words felt clumsy, but they were mine. I wrote about the party, about Riley's laugh, about Travis's silence. I wrote about the guest room, how it had felt like a cage. And I wrote about the question that wouldn't leave me. What did I do wrong? Writing was like breathing after holding my breath too long. The words poured out, messy and raw, filling page after page. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the sky outside turned inky black. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood, and for the first time in years I felt present. Not invisible, not dismissed, but here. In this dusty, creaky house, I was starting to find something, maybe not answers, but a voice. But the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a storm. I slept fitfully, the old bed sagging under me, dreams tangled with memories of Travis as a boy, of Riley's smug smile, of the life I'd thought was mine. I woke before dawn, my heart racing, the same questions circling. What did I do wrong? I carried it with me as I cleaned the house, as I swept dust from corners and scrubbed windows until they gleamed. I carried it as I walked the garden, the thorns snagging my sleeves. And I carried it as I sat at the kitchen table each night, writing in that notebook, trying to piece myself together. The town outside felt distant, its rhythm unchanged. I didn't call anyone, didn't check my phone. Travis hadn't reached out, and I wasn't surprised. Riley probably thought I'd come crawling back, apologizing for overreacting. But I wouldn't, not this time. Still, the silence was its own kind of weight. I'd left their house, but I hadn't left the pain. It followed me here, to this quiet cottage, to this new beginning that didn't feel like a beginning at all. One evening, as I sat with my notebook, the pen hovering over a blank page, I felt a shift. The question wasn't just, what did I do wrong? It was deeper, sharper, and it scared me to ask it. What if I'd been wrong about everything? About Travis, about family, about the life I'd built? I set the pen down, my hands trembling. The house creaked around me as if it knew something I didn't. And in that moment I wondered, was this solitude the start of finding myself, or the edge of something I wasn't ready to face? The silence of my mother's old house was a mirror, reflecting questions I couldn't escape. Who was I without them? What had I missed in all those years of giving? I thought I'd left the pain behind with that key on the kitchen table, but it followed me, whispering in the creak of the floorboards. Something was wrong, something deeper than Travis's silence or Riley's cruelty. And as I stood in Agnes's dusty study, my hands trembling over a locked, rusted trunk, I wondered, what truth had been hiding from me all this time? The study was a small room at the back of the cottage, its walls lined with sagging bookshelves and a single window that let in thin, gray light. The air smelled of old paper and mildew, the kind of scent that clings to forgotten things. I'd been cleaning for days, trying to make the house feel like mine, but I'd avoided this room. It was too much like Agnes, private, unyielding, full of secrets she'd never shared. But that morning, restless and unable to sit still, I pushed open the door, the hinges groaning in protest. Dust motes danced in the slanted light as I stepped inside. The desk was cluttered with faded papers, a cracked leather blotter, and a chipped mug that still held the ghost of her chamomile tea. I ran my fingers over the wood, feeling the grooves where she'd pressed her pen too hard. My mother had been a midwife like me, and this room was where she'd kept her records, her thoughts, her life. I'd always thought I knew her, but now, standing here, I wasn't so sure. I started sorting through the clutter, stacking papers, wiping down shelves. That's when I saw it. A rusted metal trunk tucked under the desk, half hidden by a frayed curtain. It was small, no bigger than a suitcase, its lock tarnished but intact. I knelt, my knees creaking, and tugged at it. The trunk was heavy, scraping against the floor as I pulled it free. My heart thudded, though I didn't know why. It was just a trunk, but something about it felt deliberate, like Agnes had meant for it to stay hidden. I searched the desk drawers for a key, finding only paper clips and dried-out pens. Frustrated, I grabbed a letter opener and pried at the lock. It gave way with a sharp snap, the lid creaking as I lifted it. Inside, the contents were neatly arranged: a stack of envelopes tied with twine, a few Polaroids, and a leather-bound journal. My breath caught as I untied the twine, the envelopes yellowed and brittle. The top one was addressed to me in Agnes's precise handwriting. Estelle, for when you're ready. I sat back on my heels, the letter trembling in my hands. When you're ready? Ready for what? I slit the envelope open, careful not to tear the fragile paper. The letter was short, but each word landed like a stone. Estelle, my darling, I kept this secret because I thought I was protecting you, but you deserve the truth. Travis might not be your son. I was there the night you gave birth, working the nursery. There was a mix-up, a mistake I couldn't prove until it was too late. I've enclosed everything I found. Forgive me for my silence. The room spun. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Travis? Not my son? It couldn't be true. I'd held him, raised him, loved him. I knew every scar on his knees, every laugh he'd ever had. But Agnes's words were clear, unyielding, and they tore at the foundation of everything I believed. I reached into the trunk, my hands shaking, and pulled out the other items. A Polaroid of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket labeled Baby Walker, 1989. A photocopy of a birth record, smudged but legible, listing me as the mother. And a DNA report dated years later with a note in Agnes's handwriting. Confirmed, switched. I read the documents again, then a third time, my mind racing to make sense of them. The birth record mentioned another baby, born the same night, in the same wing, a boy named Noah Bennett. The DNA report, how had Agnes even gotten this, showed no match between me and Travis. My stomach churned. I clutched the Polaroid, searching the tiny face for something familiar, but it was just a baby, anonymous and fragile. Had I held him? Had I kissed a stranger's child and called him mine? I stood pacing the small room, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The study felt too small, the air too thick. I wanted to scream, to call Agnes and demand answers, but she was gone. She'd left me this truth, this bomb, and no way to defuse it. I thought of Travis, his distance, his coldness. Had he always known somehow that we weren't bound by blood? Was that why he'd let Riley treat me like a servant? Or was I grasping, trying to make sense of a betrayal that had no reason? I sat at the desk, the journal open before me. Agnes's entries were meticulous, detailing her suspicions from that night in the hospital. A last-minute room switch, a nurse who'd been fired soon after, a hushed settlement with another family. She'd pieced it together over years, too afraid to tell me, too guilty to stay silent forever. I traced her words, my fingers smudging the ink. She'd written, "I saw your pain, Estelle, and I couldn't bear to add to it, but the truth is yours now." The truth, it was a weight I didn't know how to carry. I looked out the window, the pines swaying in the wind, their shadows long and jagged. Noah Bennett, the name echoed in my mind, a stranger who might be my son. Was he out there, living a life I'd never known? And Travis, My Travis, the boy I'd raised. What was he to me now? I closed the journal, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. The question wasn't just who they were. It was who I'd been all these years loving a lie, and what would I do with a truth this dangerous? The truth sat in my hands, heavy as the rusted trunk I'd pried open, sharp as the words in my mother's letter. Travis wasn't my son. Noah Bennett was. The names echoed in my mind, each one a thread pulling at the fabric of my life. I'd spent years in the shadows of a family that wasn't mine, but now I had a name, a clue, a chance to unravel the lie. The question wasn't just who Noah was, it was what I'd do with this secret. Would I dare to find him, to see the son I'd never known, or was I chasing a truth that would break me all over again? The cottage was quieter than ever, the kind of quiet that amplifies every thought, every doubt. I sat at the kitchen table, the documents from Agnes's trunk spread before me like a map to a place I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The Polaroid of the newborn, maybe Noah, maybe Travis, stared up at me, its edges curled with age. The DNA report, clinical and cold, confirmed what my heart still refused to accept. And Agnes's letter, its ink faded but its weight unending, begged me to forgive her silence. I traced the words with my fingertip, the paper rough under my skin. Forgive her? I wasn't sure I could forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. Outside, the pines swayed in a late autumn breeze, their needles rustling against the cottage's weathered siding. The air smelled of damp earth and coming frost, a scent that grounded me as I tried to make sense of the impossible. Noah Bennett. The name was a whisper, a possibility, a stranger who carried my blood. I opened Agnes's journal again, flipping to the page where she'd written about him. Noah Bennett, born March 12, 1989. Parents, Clara and Henry Bennett. Last known address, Cedar Lane, same town. My breath caught. He was here, in this small Utah town, living a life I'd never touched. How had I not known? How had I walked these streets, shopped at the market, lived my days, and never felt him? I stood, pacing the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my slow, deliberate steps. The kettle sat cold on the stove, the teacup I'd used last night still in the sink, its rim stained with chamomile. I needed to move, to do something, but my hands trembled with indecision. What did I even want? To meet Noah? To confront Travis? To rewrite the past? I stopped by the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The garden outside was a tangle of thorns and wilted roses, a mirror of the chaos inside me. I'd spent so long being Estelle, the mother, the helper, the invisible one. Now, with this truth in my hands, I felt like a stranger to myself. I returned to the table, picking up the birth record. Noah's name was typed in neat black ink, a fact as undeniable as the date beside it. I grabbed my notebook, the one I'd been writing in since I arrived, and jotted down everything I knew. Noah Bennett, lawyer, Cedar Lane. Agnes had noted he was a civil attorney, respected, with a small office downtown. I didn't know how she'd found this, but her precision was chilling. She'd watched him, maybe even met him, and never told me. The thought stung, but it also spurred me forward. If she could dig this deep, so could I. I drove into town that afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds that promised snow. The town was quiet, its streets lined with brick storefronts and bare trees, their branches clawing at the gray. I parked near the library, a squat building with fogged windows, and went inside. The air smelled of old books and wax polish, the kind of place where secrets could hide in plain sight. I sat at a computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed, Noah Bennett, Utah attorney, into the search bar, my heart pounding as the results loaded. There he was, a website for Bennett Law, a simple page with a photo of a man about Travis's age, maybe 35, dark hair, kind eyes, a smile that was warm but reserved. I leaned closer, studying his face. Did he look like me? Like my father? I searched for something familiar, a curve of the jaw, a tilt of the head, but he was just a stranger in a suit. The website listed an office address on Main Street, not far from the coffee shop I used to visit. He was so close. Had I passed him on the sidewalk, sat near him at a diner? The thought made my chest ache, a mix of longing and fear. I printed the page, the machines hum loud in the quiet library. The librarian, a woman with gray curls and a kind smile, handed me the sheet. "Researching something?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, tucking the paper into my bag. "Just looking for someone," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't press, and I was grateful. I left the library, the cold air biting my cheeks as I walked to my car. The printout felt heavy in my bag, a secret I wasn't ready to share. The next day I drove to Main Street, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Noah's office was in a narrow brick building, its sign small but polished. Bennett Law, Civil Practice. I parked across the street, near a coffee shop with fogged windows and the smell of roasted beans drifting out. I didn't go in, not to the office, not yet. Instead, I sat in my car, the heater humming, and watched. The street was busy enough to blend in, people hurrying past with scarves and steaming cups. I felt like a detective in a movie, but there was nothing glamorous about this. Just a woman, 66 years old, trying to find her son. Around noon, the office door opened and a man stepped out. Noah. I knew it was him, even from a distance. He wore a navy coat, his breath visible in the cold air as he locked the door. He was taller than I'd expected, his movements calm, deliberate. He walked to the coffee shop, holding the door for an older woman before stepping inside. I watched through the window as he ordered, his smile easy, his posture relaxed. He didn't look like a man carrying a secret, but then, neither did I. I didn't follow him inside. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, my heart too loud in my chest. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Noah, coffee shop, 12:15. Polite, kind." The words felt inadequate, but they were a start. I stayed there for an hour, watching as he returned to his office, a paper cup in hand. I imagined walking up to him saying, "What? I'm your mother?" The thought was absurd, terrifying. I wasn't ready, not yet. Over the next few days, I returned to Main Street, always at different times, always careful not to be seen. I sat in the coffee shop once, at a corner table, pretending to read a newspaper while Noah sat 2 tables away, typing on a laptop. His fingers moved quickly, his brow furrowed in concentration. I studied him, searching for pieces of myself. The way he tilted his head when he listened to the barista. The quiet laugh he gave when she spilled sugar and apologized. He was warm, thoughtful, nothing like Travis's cold indifference. The realization hurt, but it also stirred something in me. Hope, maybe, or resolve. I started checking the documents again, cross-referencing dates, names, anything that could confirm Agnes's findings. I called the hospital, posing as a researcher, and asked about records from 1989. The clerk was curt, saying most files were archived or destroyed, but I heard the unease in her voice when I mentioned a mix-up. It was enough to keep me going. I wrote everything in my notebook, each detail a step closer to understanding. Noah, lawyer, lives alone, parents retired. I didn't know what I was building, but it felt like a case, a plan, a way to reclaim what had been stolen. Each night, I sat in the cottage, the lamplight casting shadows on the walls. The pines outside whispered in the wind, their rhythm steadying my thoughts. I was investigating, yes, but it was more than that. I was waking up. The woman who'd lived in the guest room, who'd let herself be erased, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who watched, who questioned, who refused to stay silent. But as I closed my notebook, the question lingered, sharp and unyielding. When I found Noah, would I have the courage to tell him the truth? Or would this secret, like so many others, bury me? The truth about Noah burned inside me, a flame I couldn't extinguish. I'd watched him from afar, seen the kindness in his eyes, the life he'd built without me. But knowing he was my son wasn't enough. I needed to reclaim what was mine, not just my blood, but my dignity, my home, my name. Travis and Riley thought they could erase me, but they'd forgotten one thing. This house, this life they flaunted, was built on my sacrifices. As I sat in the dim light of my mother's cottage, a new question rose, cold and clear. How do you undo a lie? You don't beg, you don't scream, you take it apart, piece by piece, with the law on your side. The cottage kitchen was my war room now, the table cluttered with Agnes's documents, my notebook, and a steaming mug of black coffee. The air smelled of damp wood and the faint tang of ink, the kind of scent that sharpens your focus. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, the pines bending but not breaking. I envied their resilience. My hands, though, were steady as I opened my notebook, flipping to the page where I'd written about Noah. His life was real, tangible, a beacon pulling me forward. But to reach him, to rebuild myself, I had to dismantle the lie I'd lived, starting with the house. I'd learned something by accident, scrolling through public records on the library computer. Travis and Riley had tried to refinance the house last month. Their application denied. The reason? The deed was still in my name. I'd never signed it over, never trusted Riley's promises to handle the paperwork later. I'd paid every mortgage bill, every tax, every repair. The house was mine, legally, undeniably, and they'd built their glossy life on a foundation they didn't own. The realization hit like a spark, igniting something I hadn't felt in years: power. I drove to the town's only law office that wasn't Noah's, a modest building with frost-covered windows and a sign that read, "Moore and Associates." Linda Moore was a name I hadn't thought of in decades, a fellow midwife from my hospital days, now a lawyer with a reputation for being sharp and unyielding. The waiting room smelled of leather and coffee, the kind of place where deals were made and truths were uncovered. When Linda saw me, her face softened, her gray eyes crinkling at the edges. "Estelle Walker," she said, her voice warm but curious. "It's been too long." We sat in her office, a small space with bookshelves stuffed to bursting and a window overlooking the snow-dusted street. I told her everything. Not about Noah, not yet, but about the house, the guest room, the way Travis and Riley had treated me. I told her about the refinance attempt, the deed in my name, the life I'd been pushed out of. Linda listened, her pen tapping softly against a notepad, her expression shifting from sympathy to resolve. "They assumed you'd stay quiet," she said, leaning back in her chair. "They assumed wrong." I handed her the documents I'd brought: mortgage records, tax receipts, the deed itself, all meticulously organized in a folder I'd labeled Reclamation. Linda flipped through them, her brow furrowing as she read. "This is airtight," she said, her voice steady. "The house is yours. They've got no claim, not legally. What do you want to do?" I hesitated, my fingers twisting the strap of my purse. What did I want? Revenge? No, not the kind that screamed or burned. I wanted justice, the kind that was quiet, precise, undeniable. "I want the house back," I said, my voice low but firm. "I want them out, and I want it done right." Linda nodded, a glint of respect in her eyes. "We'll start with a formal notice," she said. "They'll have 30 days to vacate or we list the house for sale. No negotiation, no extensions. You're the owner, Estelle. They're tenants at best, squatters at worst." The words felt like a key turning in a lock, opening something I'd kept shut too long. I signed the paper she prepared, my hand steady, the pen gliding across the page like it was carving my name back into the world. Over the next few days, I dug deeper, not just into the house, but into Travis and Riley's lives. I wasn't spying, not exactly, just observing, the way I'd watched Noah. I used the library computer again, searching public records, social media, anything I could find. Riley's Instagram was a curated lie, all sunlit brunches and motivational quotes, but the cracks were showing. Her latest post, a selfie in a yoga studio, had fewer likes than usual, the comments sparse. I found a local business directory listing her Lifestyle Coaching LLC, but the reviews were scathing. Overpriced, fake, never delivers. I printed them, adding them to my folder. Travis was harder to track. He'd deleted his LinkedIn profile, but a quick search of job boards showed he hadn't posted a resume in months. He'd quit his job last year, something Riley had spun as pursuing his passion. Passion didn't pay bills, though, and I knew Riley's coaching wasn't covering the mortgage. They were drowning, and they'd thought they could float on my silence. I wrote it all down in my notebook, each detail a brick in the wall I was building. Riley, maxed credit cards. Travis, unemployed. House, mine. I didn't confront them. I didn't call, didn't drive by their house. That would have been too loud, too desperate. Instead, I let Linda handle it. She sent the notice, a single page delivered by certified mail, stating the house would be listed in 30 days unless they vacated. I imagined Riley opening it, her manicured nails tearing the envelope, her face paling as she read. I imagined Travis pacing the living room, his voice rising in panic. "She can't do this!" I could almost hear him say, his tone sharp with disbelief. But I could. I was. Each night I sat in the cottage, the lamplight warm against the cold dark outside. The pines whispered, their shadows dancing on the walls. I opened my notebook, not to write about Travis or Riley, but about me. "I am Estelle Walker," I wrote, the words deliberate, heavy. "I am not a guest. I am not a maid. I am the one who paid." The act of writing felt like reclaiming ground, like planting a flag in soil I'd abandoned. I thought of Noah, of the life he didn't know we'd lost. This wasn't just about the house. It was about making space for the truth, for him, for me. But as I closed the notebook, a new question settled in my chest, quiet but insistent. When the house was gone, when Travis and Riley faced the consequences, would I be ready to face Noah? To tell him who I was? The documents on the table seemed to stare back, daring me to decide. I'd started this fight, but where would it lead me next? The notice was sent, the clock ticking on Travis and Riley's borrowed life. I'd set the wheels in motion, reclaiming what was mine with the quiet force of truth and law. But as I sat in the cottage, the weight of Agnes's letter heavy in my mind, I knew this wasn't just about a house. It was about Travis, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd betrayed me. He wasn't my son, not by blood, but I'd loved him as if he were. Now, with the truth burning in my chest, a new question rose. Could I face him, not as a mother, but as a woman who'd finally stopped begging for his love? The cottage was a sanctuary, its walls thick with the scent of old wood and the faint sweetness of the lavender I'd planted in the garden. But that evening, as the November sky turned bruise purple, the peace felt fragile. I sat at the kitchen table, my notebook open, the pen idle in my hand. The documents from Agnes's trunk were stacked neatly beside me, their edges worn from my constant handling. The Polaroid of the newborn, Travis or Noah, stared up, its tiny face a question I couldn't answer. I'd been writing again, not just facts but feelings, trying to untangle the love I'd given from the pain it had cost me. "I loved him," I wrote, the words stark against the page. "But he didn't love me back. Not enough." The knock came just after dusk, 3 sharp raps that jolted me from my thoughts. I froze, my heart thudding. No one came here, not unannounced. I stood smoothing my sweater and peered through the window. Travis stood on the porch, his shoulders hunched, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked smaller than I remembered, his coat too thin for the weather, his hair unkempt. For a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, 6 years old, clinging to me after a nightmare. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd let me be humiliated. I opened the door, the hinges creaking, and stepped back to let him in. The air between us was heavy, charged with things unsaid. He didn't meet my eyes at first, his gaze darting to the floor, the walls, anywhere but me. "Mom," he said, his voice rough, breaking on the word. It was the first time he'd called me that in years, and it stung more than it soothed. I didn't respond, just gestured to the kitchen table. He sat, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. I took the chair across from him, my movements slow, deliberate. The lamplight cast shadows on his face, deepening the circles under his eyes. He looked tired, unraveling, a man caught in a storm he hadn't seen coming. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The house, the notice. Why?" I leaned back, studying him. His question wasn't about the house. Not really. It was about us, about the years I'd stayed silent, about the moment I'd stopped. "You know why?" I said, my voice steady but soft, like the rustle of pines outside. "You let Riley call me the help. You let her laugh. You sat there, Travis, and you did nothing." He flinched, his hands tightening. I didn't think it was that bad. His voice cracked and he looked up, his eyes wet. I'm sorry, okay? I should have said something. I should have stopped her. I felt a pang, sharp and familiar, but I pushed it down. Sorry wasn't enough, not after years of silence, years of being pushed aside. You didn't just let her, I said, my words measured, each one a stone laid carefully. You agreed with her. You told me to find a place of my own, in the house I paid for, in the home I built for you. He shook his head, his breath ragged. I didn't mean it like that. Riley, she gets in my head sometimes. I thought we were building something, a family. I thought you were okay with it. Okay with being invisible? My voice rose, just enough to cut through the quiet. Okay with being a guest in my own life? I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, the wood cool under my palms. I raised you, Travis. I gave you everything, my money, my time, my heart, and you treated me like a maid. He broke then, a sob escaping as he buried his face in his hands. I'm sorry, he choked out, his shoulders shaking. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to stand up to her. I'm losing everything, Mom. The house, Riley, everything. I watched him cry, and part of me, the mother who'd bandaged his knees, who'd stayed up nights worrying, wanted to reach out, to comfort him. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. Instead, I stood and walked to the counter, where Agnes's letter waited in its envelope. I picked it up, the paper heavy with truth, and set it before him. Read this, I said, my voice calm, final. He looked up, confused, his eyes red. What is it? Just read. He opened the envelope, his hands trembling as he unfolded the letter. I watched his face as he read, saw the moment the truth hit, his eyes widening, his breath catching, his hands dropping to the table. This can't be right, he whispered, his voice barely audible. So I was never yours? I sat again, meeting his gaze. No, I said, each word deliberate, but I treated you like you were. He stared at me, his mouth open, the letter crumpled in his fist. And you treated me like a maid, I continued, my voice steady, though my heart ached. Blood or not, I loved you, Travis. I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing. He shook his head, tears streaming now. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know any of this. I thought you were just... Just what? I asked, my tone sharp now, cutting through his excuses. Just the woman who paid your bills? Just the one who cleaned up after you and Riley? Just the one you could ignore? He didn't answer, just sobbed, his head bowed. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a quiet, heavy clarity. I'd loved him as my son, but he'd chosen to see me as less. Blood didn't make that betrayal. It was his choices, his silence, his laughter at that birthday party. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. You need to go, I said, my voice soft but firm. The house is being sold. The life you built on my back is over. He looked up, his face a mask of shock and grief. Mom, please, he said, reaching for my hand. Don't do this. We can fix it. I can change. I stepped back, out of his reach. It's not my job to fix you, I said. Not anymore. He stood, unsteady, the letter still in his hand. He looked around the kitchen, as if searching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing left. I walked him to the door, the cold air rushing in as I opened it. He paused on the porch, his breath clouding in the dark. I'm sorry, he whispered, one last time. I didn't respond. I closed the door, the click of the latch loud in the silence. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, my eyes dry. I'd faced him, not with anger, not with tears, but with the truth. And in that moment, I felt something new. Not forgiveness, not closure, but freedom. The question wasn't whether I could forgive Travis. It was whether I could forgive myself for loving him so long. And as I turned back to the kitchen, the documents waiting, I knew the next step wasn't about him. It was about Noah and the truth I owed him. The door closed behind Travis, the silence of the cottage wrapping around me like a shawl. I'd faced the son I'd raised, the one who wasn't mine, and let him go, not with anger, but with a truth that cut deeper than any words. Now Noah waited, the son I'd never known, living a life just miles away. I'd watched him, studied him, carried his name like a secret prayer, but knowing he was my son wasn't enough. The question trembled in my chest. Could I stand before him, tell him who I was, and face the heart of a man who'd never called me mother? The cottage was dim, the lamplight casting soft shadows on the walls, the air heavy with the scent of pine and old paper. I sat at the kitchen table, Agnes's documents spread before me like a confession. The Polaroid of the newborn, the DNA report, her letter, they were no longer just clues, but a bridge to a life I'd lost. My notebook lay open, pages filled with my observations of Noah. Coffee shop, 12:15, polite, kind, reads poetry. I'd written those words to know him, to hold him close without touching him. But now the time for watching was over. I needed to speak. I stood, my hands unsteady as I gathered the documents into a folder. The weight of them was grounding, a reminder that this truth wasn't just mine, it was Noah's too. I thought of his face in the coffee shop, the way he'd smiled at the barista, the quiet strength in his movements. He was a man, not a boy, with a life I hadn't shaped. What right did I have to disrupt it? Yet the thought of staying silent, of letting this secret die with me, was unbearable. I'd lost too much to lies already. The next morning I drove to Main Street, the sky a pale gray, the air sharp with the promise of snow. Noah's office was as I remembered. Brick, understated. The sign, Bennett Law, gleaming in the cold light. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I clutched the folder. I'd been here before, pretending to need legal advice, but this time was different. No more hiding. I stepped out of the car, the wind biting my cheeks, and crossed the street. The door was heavy, the bell above it chiming softly as I entered. The office was small, warm, smelling of coffee and polished wood. A receptionist glanced up, but I didn't need to speak. Noah was there, standing by a filing cabinet, a stack of papers in his hands. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. He was so familiar, yet so unknown. "Estelle, right?" he said, his voice kind, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Back for more advice?" I nodded, though my throat was tight. "Something like that," I said, my voice softer than I meant. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, and I sat, the folder heavy in my lap. The room was quiet, save for the hum of a heater and the occasional rustle of papers. Noah sat, his hands clasped, his expression open but curious. "What's on your mind?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. I took a breath, my fingers tightening on the folder. The words I'd rehearsed, "I'm your mother, there was a mistake," felt too blunt, too heavy. Instead, I opened the folder and slid it across the desk. "I need you to read this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "It's about you, about us." He raised an eyebrow, his curiosity sharpening, but he didn't hesitate. He took the folder, his fingers brushing the edge of Agnes's letter. I watched as he read, his eyes scanning the words, his face shifting from confusion to something deeper, shock maybe, or disbelief. The Polaroid, the DNA report, the hospital records. He studied each one, his hands steady but his breath uneven. When he reached the letter, his brow furrowed, and he paused, rereading Agnes's confession. "Travis might not be your son." He set the papers down, his fingers lingering on the edges, and looked at me. His eyes were glassy, but his voice was calm, controlled. "This is a lot," he said, exhaling slowly. "You're saying I'm your son?" I nodded, my heart in my throat. "I gave birth to you, Noah. 35 years ago, there was a mix-up at the hospital. You were given to another family, and I raised someone else." The words felt like stones, heavy but necessary. I watched his face, searching for anger, rejection, anything, but he just sat there, his gaze distant, processing. "I love my parents," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. They raised me well. I can't imagine anything different." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Why are you telling me this now?" The question wasn't accusatory, but it cut all the same. I leaned forward, my hands clasped to keep them from trembling. "Because I couldn't live with the silence anymore," I said. "Because you deserve to know who you are. I'm not asking to replace your parents, Noah. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know me." He nodded slowly, his fingers tracing the edge of the Polaroid. The room was silent, the heater's hum the only sound. I felt exposed, raw, like I'd laid my heart on the desk between us. But I didn't look away. I held his gaze, letting him see me, not just the woman in his office, but the mother who'd lost him, who'd found him, who'd carried this truth alone. He stood, pacing to the window, his hands in his pockets. "I don't know what to feel," he said, his voice honest, unguarded. "This doesn't change who I am, who my family is, but..." He turned, his eyes softer now. "It changes something." I swallowed, my throat tight. "You don't have to feel anything," I said. "Not yet. Not ever if you don't want to. I just needed you to have the truth." He nodded again, a faint smile breaking through. "You're brave," he said almost to himself. "Coming here, doing this." He walked back to the desk, picking up the letter. "Can we take it slow?" "Of course," I said, relief flooding me, though my heart still raced. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gestured to a small table in the corner where a kettle sat beside two mismatched mugs. "Want some tea?" he asked, his tone lighter, almost normal. I smiled, the tension easing just a fraction. "I'd love some." We sat there, the steam curling between us, talking about nothing. Books, the weather, the way the town's Christmas lights were already up. He didn't call me Mom, and I didn't expect him to. But he didn't push me away either. And in that small, warm office, with the truth laid bare between us, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Not for a family, not yet, but for a connection, fragile but real. As I left, the folder tucked under my arm, a new question settled in my heart. Could this be the start of something new, not just for Noah, but for me? And what would it mean to build a life not on what I'd lost, but on what I'd found? I'd told Noah the truth, laid my heart bare in his quiet office, and found a fragile thread of connection. Not a son, not yet, but a man who didn't turn me away. The weight of that moment lingered, a flicker of hope in a life I was rebuilding. But back in the cottage, the legal notice I'd sent to Travis and Riley ticked like a clock, counting down to the end of their borrowed world. I'd started this fight to reclaim my dignity, my home, my truth. Now, as the law moved forward, a new question pressed against my chest. Would justice feel like victory, or would it leave me hollow, staring at the ruins of a life I'd once loved? The cottage was a fortress of calm, its walls thick with the scent of cedar and the faint warmth of the fire I'd lit in the hearth. Outside, the December wind howled, rattling the windows and piling snow against the pines. I sat at the kitchen table, my notebook open, the pages filled with my journey. Travis's betrayal, Noah's quiet acceptance, the house that was mine. Linda Moore's latest letter lay beside it, her precise handwriting outlining the final steps. The house is listed, sale pending, 30-day vacate period ends tomorrow. I traced the words, the ink cool under my fingertip. It was almost over. The sale had moved faster than I'd expected. A young couple, new to town, had made an offer above asking price, drawn to the house's charm, the same charm I'd poured my heart into creating. Linda had handled the paperwork, her efficiency a shield against Travis and Riley's attempts to stall. Riley had tried to fight, of course. Linda told me about the frantic email she'd sent, claiming she'd contributed to the home's value with her decorating, her care. I could almost hear her voice, sharp and entitled, insisting she deserved a share. But she had no proof, no receipts, no contracts, nothing but her Instagram posts and a crumbling facade. Linda had dismissed it with a single sentence. Let her try to prove it in court. She wouldn't. She couldn't. I stood, pacing the small kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my slow steps. The fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, the crackle of burning logs the only sound. I thought of the house, my house, its wide windows, the dining table I'd polished, the guest room that had caged me. I'd loved it once, believed it was a gift to Travis, a foundation for his future, but it had become a prison, its walls echoing with Riley's laughter and Travis's silence. Selling it wasn't revenge, not really. It was restoration, a way to take back what I'd given too freely. I opened my notebook, flipping to a blank page. I wrote, "It wasn't about the money, it was about the truth." The pen moved smoothly, the words grounding me. I didn't need the house anymore, didn't need its memories or its weight. The sale would give me freedom, money to start over, to build a life that was mine. But as I wrote, I felt a pang. Not for Travis or Riley, but for the woman I'd been. The one who'd believed love meant sacrifice, who'd stayed quiet too long. She was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. The town buzzed with whispers, though I stayed away from the gossip. Linda told me Riley's downfall was public now, her carefully curated life unraveling on social media. A local blogger had dug into her lifestyle coaching business, exposing fake testimonials, unpaid debts, and a trail of angry clients. Her Instagram posts stopped, her account set to private. Comments on her last public post, something about rising above challenges, were brutal. "Pay your bills, Riley." "Fake it till you break it, huh?" I didn't read them myself. I didn't need to. The world was seeing her for what she was, and I hadn't lifted a finger to make it happen. Travis was quieter, his collapse less visible but no less complete. Linda heard he'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, a place with peeling paint and a flickering streetlight outside. He'd applied for jobs, gas station clerk, warehouse worker, but his resume was thin, his confidence thinner. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know. I'd seen him at his lowest, crying in my kitchen, and I'd felt no joy in his pain. It wasn't about punishment, it was about consequences, and they'd built their own. I drove past the house one last time, the day before the sale closed. The moving truck was gone, the lawn bare, the windows dark. I didn't stop, didn't get out. I just slowed, letting the sight sink in. The porch where I'd hung balloons, the kitchen where I'd baked cakes, the guest room where I'd lost myself. It was all behind me now. I felt no triumph, no sorrow, just a quiet resolve. I'd taken it back, not with fire or fury, but with the steady hand of truth. Back at the cottage, I sat by the fire, the warmth seeping into my bones. I opened my notebook and wrote, "It wasn't revenge, it was restoration." The words felt right, final. I thought of Noah, of the tea we'd shared, the slow, careful steps we were taking towards something new. The house was gone, but I was still here, building a life from the ashes of the one I'd lost. The money from the sale would help, but it was the truth that set me free, the truth about Noah, about Travis, about myself. As I closed the notebook, a new question flickered, soft but persistent. With the past behind me, what would I build next? The cottage creaked, the fire popped, and outside the snow fell, blanketing the world in silence. I didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time I believed I could find it. The house was sold, the lies unraveled, the truth about Noah set free. I'd reclaimed my name, my dignity, my life, not with vengeance, but with the quiet strength of a woman who'd learned her worth. The cottage, once a refuge, was now a home, its walls holding my story. But as I stood in the snowy garden, the pines whispering under a pale December sky, a new question bloomed, delicate but unyielding. Who was I now, without the weight of the past? And what would it mean to live, not as the mother I'd been, but as the woman I was becoming? The cottage glowed in the early morning light, its windows catching the soft pinks and golds of dawn. The air inside was warm, scented with coffee and the faint sweetness of the bread I'd baked, a recipe I'd found in Agnes's old cookbook. The kitchen table, once my war room, was clear now, save for my notebook and a single mug. The documents, letters, records, the Polaroid, were tucked away in a drawer, no longer a burden but a part of my story, like the scars you carry but don't touch. I sat, pen in hand, and wrote, "I am Estelle Walker. I am enough." The words felt like a vow, a promise to the woman I was rediscovering. I wasn't the guest in Travis's house, nor the shadow in Riley's life. I wasn't even the mother who'd lost Noah, though that pain would always linger. I was something new, something whole, a woman who'd faced betrayal, uncovered truth, and chosen to stand tall. I flipped back through my notebook, reading the entries I'd written over these months, the birthday party, the guest room, Noah's quiet smile. Each page was a step, not away from the past, but through it, towards something brighter. Outside, the garden was dormant, the roses pruned back, their thorns no longer a threat. I'd spent days out there, my hands in the cold earth planting bulbs that would bloom come spring. It was a small act, but it felt like faith, a belief in a future I could shape. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked the path I'd cleared, the air sharp against my cheeks. I paused by the creek, its surface iced over but still moving beneath, a reminder that life persists, even in the quiet. Noah had called yesterday, his voice warm through the phone. "Want to grab coffee?" he'd asked, casual but deliberate. We'd met at the shop on Main Street, the same one where I'd watched him from afar. He'd ordered tea, I'd chosen coffee, and we'd talked about books, his latest case, the way the town's Christmas lights flickered in the cold. He didn't call me Mom, and I didn't need him to. We were building something, slow and careful, like the bulbs in my garden. He'd asked about my plans, his eyes curious, and I'd surprised myself with the answer. I'm thinking of teaching again, midwifery workshops maybe, passing on what I know. The idea had come to me one night, as I'd flipped through Agnes's journal, her notes on childbirth filled with wisdom I'd forgotten I shared. I'd been a midwife once, a damn good one, and that part of me wasn't gone, just buried. I'd called the community center last week, offered to lead a class for young mothers, and they'd jumped at the chance. "Estelle Walker," the director had said, her voice bright, "you're a legend around here." The words had startled me, a reminder that I'd been more than a guest, more than a mother, more than a victim. I didn't hear from Travis or Riley, and I didn't seek them out. The town whispered their story. Riley had left, her social media silent, her empire a memory. Travis was working odd jobs, living in that dingy apartment, a man diminished but alive. I didn't wish them harm. I didn't need to. Their collapse was their own, and I'd stepped out of their shadow. The money from the house sale sat in a new account, untouched for now. I didn't need much, just the cottage, my garden, a life I could call mine. That afternoon, I walked to the town square, the snow soft under my boots. The Christmas market was in full swing, stalls glowing with lights, the air thick with the scent of cider and pine. I bought a small wreath, its ribbons red and gold, and carried it home, my breath clouding in the cold. I hung it on the cottage door, the wood creaking as I stepped back to admire it. It was simple, but it was mine, a mark of the season, of the woman I was becoming. Back inside, I sat by the fire, the flames casting warmth across the room. I opened my notebook, not to write about the past, but to dream about the future. Classes, a garden in bloom, coffee with Noah. The words flowed, each one a seed, a possibility. I thought of the young mothers I'd teach, the lives I'd touch, the way I'd once held hands and whispered encouragement. I thought of Noah, of the slow trust we were building, of the day he might call me something other than Estelle, and I thought of myself, standing in this cottage, no longer defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was creating. As the fire crackled, the question that had bloomed in the garden settled into an answer. I was Estelle, a woman who'd survived, who'd learned, who'd grown. The past was a chapter, not a chain. I closed the notebook, my hand steady, and looked out the window at the snow falling soft and silent. The world was new, and so was I. What came next wasn't a question. It was a life, and I was ready to live it.